Hi, it's Jamie from Guildbrook Farm, and today I'm going to show you how we're going to amend our garden for long-term sustainability. It's springtime and our winter garden is done for the year. Our kale has bolted and our peas are coming up for our spring garden, and it's just about time to start planting our tomatoes and our peppers. So I need to start considering what kind of amendments I want to use in my garden. Now, prior to this year, I didn't add any amendments to my garden other than building it up with compost and horse manure and mulch. And then I also would chop and drop any of the plants that I had in here, bake them in, and then just replant. And then every once in a while I would add a little bit of Epsom salt to plants because supposedly that's good and helps them bulb, and it also adds magnesium to the soil. What I'm going to do is do an official soil test to see exactly where my garden's at as far as nutrients and minerals and availability of those nutrients. Now, I talked to a few people in the area who are really into sustainability and permaculture, and they recommended a company to me called Crop Services International. I also did some research on my own, and I think that they're an excellent company to go with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a soil test through them. We're going to do the CEC test, which is what's currently in your soil, and that's, if you go through an extension office, that's what they're going to give you as well. That's the kind of test that they're going to do. And the second test that we're going to do is the LaMotte test. The CEC tells you the levels of the nutrients in your soil, but the LaMotte test is going to tell you what is available to those plants. Just because something's in the soil doesn't mean that it's readily available to those plants. There might be something else that needs to be added in order to make that nutrient or that mineral available to the plant. So it's really important, based on my research and talking to other people, to do both of these tests in combination in order to find out not only what your levels are, but what's available to the plant. Now, why is this important, especially when it comes to self-sustainability? Well, if there is a nutrient deficiency in the soil, or if there's something in your soil that your plants are not able to absorb, and you're eating those vegetables, you're eating those fruits, then that nutrient's not available to you. And then you go and chop up whatever's left over, feed it to your animals. That nutrient's not available to them. Say, for example, chickens, and then they lay eggs. That nutrient's not available in your eggs. So it's really important in a holistic point of view to understand what's in your soil and how that plays a role into the big ecosystem with self-sustainability. So tomorrow I'm going to take you along with me as we go ahead and do the CEC test and the LaMotte test. I'm going to show you how I do it, and we're going to send it away and see what our results are. Okay, so in order to take your soil sample, you're going to need a stainless steel bowl and a stainless steel utensil for scooping out your soil. You can also use plastic, but stainless steel is preferred. You don't want to use aluminum, and you don't want to use anything that is rusted because it can contaminate the results. You also don't want to put your hand in the soil whenever you stir it around, because that can also contaminate the results. Now, unfortunately, my garden tools are rusty, so I'm not going to use that. I'm just going to use a kitchen spoon. So when you take your samples, you're going to want to take anywhere between 6 and 10 samples, depending on how big your garden is. You can take more than that if you have a much bigger garden. Ours is about 1,000 square feet, so we're going to probably take about 6 to 8 samples. And you're going to put them in the bowl and you're going to mix it all around. Now, your soil samples are going to be taken between 1 inch and 6 inches deep, because that's where your plant's roots are going to grow, and that's what we want to sample. So we're just going to walk around and we're going to start taking soil samples. All right, so I'm going to pull back the mulch because we want to make sure we don't get that in the sample. And then I'm going to start digging. And that's going to be soil sample 1. I'm going to take one here as well. Pull back the mulch. Scrape off about 1 inch. And we're going to mix that in together. A nice little earthworm there. And a vole hole. Look. right, so this is going to represent one sample. This is going to be our garden 2017 sample that we're sampling. If you were doing another area, you would want to do that completely separate in a clean bowl. So what we're going to do is we're going to mix this around, not with our hands. Just like this. And then for the two soil samples we're doing, the CEC and the LaMotte, we are going to put about 2 cups worth, no more than 2 cups worth, in a sandwich bag. And I want you to note that we put on here our name and the soil sample name, which is going to be Garden 03 2017. Again, do not use your hands to put this in. So this is our soil sample. Now we need to mail this off to Crop Services International. But before we can do that, we need to fill out their form, and we need to make sure that we include a payment for this. All right, so here's the form that you can print out on their website. Is this a garden? Yes, it is. We're gonna wanna put the date on there. What's the date? We're going to put our email address. Our field sample is called Garden 03 2017. It's a 1,000-foot garden. The crop is garden. The previous crop was also garden. We want to test for the CEC and for the LaMotte. And because I don't really know how to interpret soil samples, I'm not a soil scientist, these guys are the experts, I want their recommendations. So we're going to check yes for recommendations. We are not certified organic, but we do want sustainable recommendations. And here you can choose whether or not you want your results emailed to you or postal service. Email's fine. Just make sure that you print very, very clearly so that they know what your email address is. And here you can say if you want your recommendations listed per acre or per 1,000 square feet. So because we have a 1,000 square foot garden, we're going to go with that. I'm going to fill out the rest of this information and we're going to get this mailed off. Now, another thing to note here is they give recommendations, or they can give recommendations that are based off of what you currently use or what you currently have available. I put a list here together of our current amendments, which is horse manure, some kitchen compost, deep wood mulch, cedar pine mix, and Epsom salt. And then amendments that I have on hand that I picked up this year, or that I have readily available, or all of the above, plus I got some dolomite, I have some bone meal, I have Neptune's Harvest, which is used as a foliage spray, and I have some azomite that I picked up. Now, I don't know what I'm going to add to this, I don't know what I need, but when they give their recommendations, supposedly they're going to base that off of what I have on hand. So that's kind of cool, rather than you going out and buying new things. So I'm going to put these together along with my labeled soil sample. We're going to put it in our envelope. So we also need to include a payment in here for those, for the CEC, the LaMotte, and then also for the recommendations. That's going to be $77. The forms of payment that they take are either a money order or a certified bank check. Now, I'm going to the post office. They should have money orders there. So when I go to mail this, before I seal it all up, I'm going to get a money order for $77 and include it in here. And then this should be ready to go. Okay, so we got the results back from our soil test. Within 3 days, they sent me an email saying that they received the soil test and that they had replaced the LaMotte test with something called the PACE test. So if you guys go to submit your own samples from this company, whether you check the LaMotte or the PACE, they're going to replace it with the PACE. Apparently it's a better test to do, and so just so you know that it's the same price, but that's what they're going to use going forward. within, I would say, 10 days of submitting my soil sample, I got my results via email. And I'm going to show you what they showed. All right, so here are the results of my test. Now, up here is my CEC test, and down here is the saturated paste, which, like I said, was the LaMotte, but they replaced it with the saturated paste. This tells me what is in my soil, and this tells me what is available to the plants. And you can see up here are the targeted amounts, and you can see that my phosphate is really low, magnesium is really high, potassium is low, sodium is a little low, my sulfur is extremely low, and so on and so forth. Copper, about half what it should be, and zinc is a little low. Down here is what is available to my plants, and you can see what is low is sulfur, phosphate, calcium, magnesium, potassium, boron, copper, zinc, magnesium. Did I already say that one? I don't know what Mn is. Well, that actually brings me to the point. I am not a soil scientist, so I want to show you what the real value is in this test, and that is their recommendations. This tells me exactly how much to add of what to my soil for 1,000 square feet, of which my garden just so happens to be 1,000 square feet. I need 15 pounds of Tennessee brown phosphate, 7 pounds of potassium sulfate, 2 pounds of elemental sulfur, 7 ounces of boron, 6 ounces of copper. Down here it tells me a liquid treatment that I can use, which down in the results it says that the Neptune harvest that I'm using is a good product, so we can use that to substitute for the kelp and the fish. And molasses is something that I have on hand for the animals, so I can go ahead and add that. So when I go to plant my garden, I'm going to dig my trench, and I'm going to put in my Neptune and my molasses for the liquids. Now over here is some of the products that they carry that they recommend adding to the soil as well. Now I don't have any of these products, but I believe that what these are here is basically going to make it more available and more quickly available to the plants than this. This is more of a long-term sustainable. This is more of a what we can add to get the results up immediately. So I'm not going to use this, but I am going to do these, and I am going to do this when I go to plant. And down below, just so you guys can see, it tells you exactly how to apply it, where you're going to mix all the dry ingredients and we're just going to spread it on top. We're going to just broadcast it, and it tells you about side dressing and foliar applications and how often to do it. And one thing to note, avoid using dolomite, lime, or Epsom salts. Both supply magnesium, a mineral you have too much of already. So by adding the sulfur to my soil, it's going to bring down those magnesium levels. So what I was doing with that I thought was right. I thought I was adding Epsom salts and that was good for the plants. I was just already contributing to an already existing problem. So that's why it's really important to get results like this and to understand what we really truly need to add to your soil. So let me show you what I got from the store. Alright, so I went to my garden center, and if you guys go to a really good garden center, they will weigh out exactly what you need so you're not buying huge amounts of every product. So I went to my garden center and I got the Tennessee brown rock phosphate. I got 15 pounds of that, 7 pounds of the potassium sulfate. This is actually 3 pounds of sulfur in this bag. I got, what else did I get? Copper sulfate. Right here, I ordered this off of Amazon. The zinc sulfate, and for the boron, all you need is borax. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix these together into a big bucket based on my recommendations over here with the exact amounts, and I do have a scale for these smaller amounts. And we're just going to go ahead and we're going to broadcast it all over this garden. Okay, I have my other ingredients, my zinc, my boron, and my copper. all measured out in here, and I'm going to mix in the other bigger ingredients, and then we're going to get to spreading. We're going to use a second bucket to make sure this gets mixed up pretty good. And just a side note, guys, when you're doing this, you should probably be wearing gloves. Some of this stuff can be an irritant. I just tend to not do that sometimes. But I do want to warn you guys that you should probably wear gloves. All right, now we're just going to broadcast all over the garden. I'm going to spread some along the outside as well. Sometimes I grow my herbs out there and some other flowers and put some on my blueberry plants. These are my pomegranate plants, so we'll sprinkle some on here. Here's another one. Evie says good morning. And we'll sprinkle it all along this row out here. And we'll put some along the outside here and on my blueberry plants up there. Alright, so we broadcast all of the recommended amendments onto our garden, and I wanted to just show you the liquid amendments that I'm going to use. So the one that I talked about was the Neptune's Harvest. So this is going to replace the organo fish and the soluble kelp that is recommended from them. And then here we have our molasses, and this is just blackstrap molasses. Has a lot of copper in it and a lot of other minerals. When I go to plant, I'm going to dig my trench. I'm going to mix it in this container according to the recommended amounts, and I'm going to add water to it, and I'm going to spray it in the trench where I'm planting the plants. Plant my my plants, and then every 2 weeks I'm going to reapply the spray. So that is what we are doing here to try and increase the amount of nutrients in our vegetable garden and how we are going to try to become more sustainable. So some of you are going to ask, if this is so wonderful, why don't you do it to your whole property? Well, at some point we hope to, but first I want to test it on a small scale. I want to test it with just the garden. I want to see how the garden does this year. I want to do a retest next spring to see what my levels are at and see if this is working. See if it's something that I'm going to have to continually add these minerals, these amendments to the garden, or if it's something that can be maintained by chopping and dropping and composting what I harvest out of the garden. I want to see how sustainable this is before I go and do it property-wide. But I want to stress that this is extremely important. If you guys are looking to become more self-sustainable, taking care of your soil, doing a proper soil test and understanding what minerals are in your soil, what's available in your soil, what's available to you, because if it's not available to your plants, that means you're not getting those nutrients either. And that means your animals aren't getting those nutrients either. And so it's extremely important to understand what's in your soil and to figure out how to amend your soil properly. In one of my previous videos on goats, I talked about Pat Colby and how she attributes all of the diseases to goats and all of the complications with goats to mineral deficiencies such as copper, sulfur. You can see that I am low on copper, on sulfur. My magnesium's too high. I believe that by correcting this in the soil and eventually correcting it to where they're grazing, that I will not have to supplement them with copper and sulfur at some point if I can become more self-sustainable. That is what we're doing here. We're trying to become more self-sustainable. We're trying to incorporate permaculture into our homestead here, and this is how we are doing it. If you guys have any tips or tricks or any comments of your own, feel free to leave them below. Otherwise, see you in the next video.
So here's a new thing. We're finally on Instagram and Twitter. I've been putting that off forever. So we don't have much on there yet, but I'll be adding some things over the next week or so. So if you're on either one or both of those, Instagram or Twitter, and you want to follow us, please do. Twitter is at Guildbrook Farm, and Instagram is just Guildbrook Farm. And we'll see you there.